Make Mordor the destination of your next dream vacation. Enjoy an endless supply of pools, hikes, adorable wildlife and lovely neighbors, then end your day in our premium heated spa zone. We really shouldn't be joking about this because in reality, Lord of the Rings is kind of a sad story about a man who has his house burgled, then when he tries to get his property back he is kidnapped by a gardener and whatever Frodo pretends to do for a living, before ultimately ending up down a volcano. If you like this video and want me to do more like it, please leave a like and let me know in the comments, and click the notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on any future projects. Thank you so much for watching, and please enjoy the rest of the video. As I'll need some sharp details on this face sculpt, it's a perfect opportunity to see if the monster clay I hid away 3 years ago is still good or has become a petri dish for flesh-eating mold spores. This clay is perfect for carving sharp details into as it gets super hard, but that also means it gets super hard. I'll toss the whole vat into the oven to soften it up a little, and in the meantime, I'll block out a little aluminium skull to build Gollum's face meat on top of as soon as the clay is out of the oven. As his giant eyeballs are one of the main features of his face, I'll start by measuring, making and baking those out of Cosclay, and then place them on the head to build the rest of the face around. As soon as the eyeballs are socketed and I've carved in a quick mouth hole, I have to say the uncanny likeness is filling me with strong confidence and definitely not crippling self-doubt. Now, Gollum has so many facial expressions to pick from, but to shoot for the movie version of the scene, I'll try to achieve a combination of these for a look that simultaneously says, "Yay, ring," and "Oh no, lava, oopsie." While past me sculpts away at the face, let current me turn my chair around and talk to you fellow kids for a second about a couple of future channel things. First up, like everyone else and their grandma, I'm thinking about setting up a Patreon to let the 4 of you who have asked help support the mess we make here on the channel, as well as giving me a chance to connect more with you guys. Now, I already have some fun ideas about what to reward that support with, but definitely let me know in the comments what you would like to see if I end up doing this. The other thing is that I'm considering changing the name of the channel to just something a bit more creative than my own dumb name, so something unique like Studlar Studio, Geek Foundry, Boilar's Hobby Hour, even more norther of the border. If for nothing else, then it would probably be a lot easier to guilt you guys into buying one of those t-shirts than one branded with this guy. Okay, that's enough. Back to the video. While I did start this thing off by talking about how important the eyeballs are, I just realized they aren't nearly bulging enough, which is definitely contributing to the lack of similarity to our tater-hating tour guide. I'll add another layer of clay on top and try to make that as smooth and round as I can, then add some more meat to the eyelids to compensate. And since we're already talking about doing things in the wrong order, I also realized now that I need to dig out a ton more clay from the mouth to be able to fit this jumbled set of chompers. Did you know that in animation we call the inside of the mouth a mouth bag? Pretty gross. I've pre-baked a bunch of teeth in different sizes that, in addition to being really tricky to grip with tweezers, are also pretty fragile and prone to breaking as I try to shove them into Gollum's gums. I cut the remaining teeth to size and shaped them a bit with sandpaper, which also had the added bonus of making them even harder to manipulate with tweezers. The coolest part of this whole operation is that, spoilers, these teeth will of course be impossible to mold, so none of this actually matters. I know sculpting ears can seem daunting, but the process is actually pretty simple if you just break it down. Start by squishing a thick pancake onto the side of the skull at a bit of an angle, then take a fortune cookie of clay and use that to fill the gap behind the ear, before sketching out the curly swirly shapes inside the ear itself from reference. Now all you have to do is slowly carve away the parts that aren't supposed to be there, and voila, you have an ear. After a quick brush down with isopropyl alcohol to smooth out some of the tool marks and disgusting fingerprints, I can start sketching in all the little wrinkles, creases, and lines using different sculpting tools. The bigger, more foldy types, I also add little worms of clay to for added chunkiness. While watching my videos might indicate otherwise, I do actually sometimes learn from my mistakes. So due to the treacherous nature of the resin that I'll be submerging Smeagol's head into, I'm going to mold it so that if everything goes terribly wrong, at least I don't have to redo the entire sculpt. The head is small enough to where I can use a paper cup for mold walls, then use the even smaller cup that lives inside of it to save silicone. To make the head stand on its own, I'll matrix an armature wire skull plug into Smeagol's head, attach that to a cylindrical clay base, then glue that to the mold base so that it doesn't just float up when we add the silicone. I'll begin by brushing a layer of that sticky icky into all the details and areas that would probably catch air bubbles. While I'm not legally allowed to stipple that goop, there exists a loophole that lets me dump it directly onto a face, so let's do that. Then, as soon as the mold is filled, I'll leave it overnight to cure. The blue goop is now cured, and much like the fellowship at Amon Hen, our makeshift mold enclosure can easily be broken apart to free the silicone from its cardboard prison. Now, this silicone is a little too stiff to just pop the sculpt out, so I'll have to do a bit of surgery on it. The mold itself looks fine, as far as I can tell. Most of Gollum's teeth were brutally ripped out of his mouth during the demold, and there is a little bit of clay residue still stuck in the mold, but a Q-tip and a bit of alcohol have solved way worse problems than this. As I was digging through our basement storage unit for our upcoming move, I had the nice surprise of finding these big boys of PU casting resin I totally forgot I had. Now, they've been down there for several years, so whether they still work or not remains to be seen. As I'm way too busy to get lung cancer right now, I made the controversial decision to open a window and let in some sunlight. After carefully taking steps to not spill any of this hazardous chemical on my desk or equipment, I measured out part A and B and set them aside for a few minutes to let the bubbles from the pour air out. The nice thing about using coffee cups for mold walls is that I can just pop the mold into another identical cup, and it should give the silicone a snug enough fit to make sure it's good and closed up. This resin has a 3-minute working time that starts as soon as parts A and B touch. When I had spent as much time as I dared give myself to mix this illegal smoothie, I poured a bit of it into the mold, swirled it around a few times to get into some of the detailed nooks and crannies, as well as use a wooden skewer to try to noodle out whatever small air bubbles might have gotten stuck in there. I then have just about enough time left on the clock to fill the rest of the mold, do a risky last poke with the stick, and wait for it to start setting up. 20 minutes later and the resin is cured, and if I can actually find the opening, we can check out our new very hard and very white Gollum. The ears are as expected not filled in, but that part will be under the lava, so that's okay. And I'll have to attach all new teeth into his mouth again, but I'm gonna do that off camera to spare you from my reading of every Norwegian swear word.
It's some form of Elvish. I can't read it.
There are a few who can.
My lucky choice of subject means this time I only have to make one arm, starting by hunting down an armature wire in its natural state and bending it into shape. A pro life hack for arms that have hands at the end, which is a lot of them, is to start with one length of wire per finger, twist most of it into a sturdy arm armature, then splaying out the end bits to use as finger bones. Then you can just snip them to size, measure out-ish where the joints would be, and start posing. I used Sculpey to build the hands, which in hindsight wasn't the best idea, as Cosclay would have stayed posable after baking, but it was probably late, and with a brain that barely functions even in broad daylight, you don't always get the most ideal decisions. As I kept working on the fingers, I quickly realized that these are like ET levels long. They had to get trimmed pretty substantially, meaning I got the pleasure of undoing and redoing all my posing work. I mean, it didn't really take that long, but there are like 5 of them. Art would be so much easier if one of our forefathers had just met a handsome Sebastian somewhere along the evolutionary tree. I'll slowly build up the different bony or meaty lumps and bumps of the hand, one clay nug at a time, before using smaller sculpting tools to carve in smaller details like wrinkles and fingernails. Now, I did notice that our cave-dwelling friend has developed a bit of frog-like webbing between his fingers for swimming and, I don't know, better hugs or whatever. I'll gingerly noodle and ball stylus that into place, and our hand sculpt is pretty much done. When it comes to the body, I do tend to maybe lean a little too heavily on anatomy, often leading to even my most cutesy characters looking like they're about 5 minutes away from hitting the stage at Mr. Olympia. Unfortunately, it's the only way my dumb brain can wrap itself around how a body part looks, so I start off by roughly sketching out where the different muscle groups will be placed, then using that as a blueprint to block out and carve in the different anatomical bits and pieces, before hopefully smoothing and brushing most of it back into something a little more natural using alcohol. Now, if you guys knew how long this one arm took me to complete, any shred of respect for me as a sculptor you might have had prior would immediately evaporate.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Last thing I'll do to the arm is add some texture and fine wrinkling to the skin, which this metal brush tool, whose normal function is mostly to jab into my skin as I rummage around in my toolbox for other sculpting tools, is perfectly suited for. If you watched any of my videos before, you'll know that the quality of my tools are usually much like that of my jokes, poorly constructed and barely duct taped together enough to function. The good people over at Gallery also noticed this, took pity on me and asked if I maybe wanted to be a real boy and use an actual grown-up's airbrush, so they sent me one of theirs to try out. Their generous care package came with one of their classic artist range airbrushes, the 98D, which if nothing else looks amazing, as well as one of their cool mini air compressors, which looks equally awesome. And because I love you all like you were my own little hobbit children, I convinced them to give me a discount code for you guys as well, which I'll make sure to leave down in the description. After mixing up a suitably pale base skin tone, I'm genuinely pretty excited for my first time using a proper airbrush. And guess what? Airbrushes are pretty cool. I know. It's smooth as butter to operate compared to the wonky old thing I was using, and the compressor is really quiet, so it's perfect for my tiny office. So if you're like me and looking to dip your toe into the airbrush waters without having to remortgage your kids or however that works, I think you'll be hard-pressed to find a better bang for your buck than the Gallery tools. In my continuing efforts to become less at painting, I got the idea to experiment with doing skin in a way that kind of resembles how we build skin materials digitally in VFX. The idea, at least, is to begin with washing in the different subdermal skin tones first, starting with the red or warm areas where we'll have more blood circulating close to the skin, or thicker masses of meaty tissue like the nasolabial folds, the ears, nose, and the more muscular parts of the arm and hand. The cooler tones I'll use to shade the parts that are either recessed or where the bone is closer to the skin. Now, adding the purples ended up being a lesson for young Lars about why we prime our models, as all of the paint in some areas simply came straight off. Now, in yet another case of doing things in the dumbest possible order, I realized I should probably paint the inside of the mouth before spending too much time painting the surrounding lip area. Now, I thought I might be able to just sneak some paint in there without making a mess of things. I could not. With the underlying colors in place, my plan was to slap a greenish wash all over the model, thinking that would hopefully tie everything together, give the overall skin a more green and sickly tone to it, as well as gather in all the wrinkles and recesses to darken those details. While it did do some of that, it mostly ended up looking like someone dipped a clown in motor oil, and I hate it. My semi-panicking last resort to not have to start all over again with the painting was to wash the whole face with layers and layers of super thin skin color with a little bit of green in it, which luckily did manage to eventually tie a lot of the messy colored parts together. While that is drying, I'll do a quick base color pass on the fingernails, teeth, and eyeballs, followed by a round of brown wash to get that flawless Hollywood manicure and tooth veneer look Gollum is known for.
What did you say?
I mixed up a dark red color to bring some of the meaty warmth back to a few areas, like around the eyes, the lips, and the tip of the nose and nostrils. A few moles and freckles later, and the skin of the face is officially done. Now, eyes are always tricky to get right, at least for me. It usually ends up looking like they're either super high or at best cross-eyed, often both. I started off by placing a dot where I want the pupils to be to see that the eyes are at least kind of looking in the same general direction. I'm basically working from the outside in. I'll paint a brighter layer slightly on the inside of the first circle, leaving that to act as the darker ring around the iris. I then added a middle tone inside that again to try to get a bit more depth to the eye, before making an extremely poor attempt to make a round, pure black pupil in the middle. A few little dabs of light blue to fake some internal highlights no one will probably ever notice, then finish it all up with a couple of choice red veins from the corners of the eye. Last step is to frost the whole thing with a drop of UV resin for that delicious wet eyeball look, and the eyes are also done. One of my pet peeves with a lot of model painting is that everything ends up with the same specularity all over, which is hard to avoid, but this time I did make a little bit of an effort by dabbing a little gloss varnish, not only on the lips, but also a little on select areas to maybe simulate a bit of oiliness or sweat drops. The biggest question mark of this whole project was always going to be the lava pool. I could try to just sculpt it in clay, which would be a cheaper and way less time-consuming approach. However, I don't trust my own painting abilities to be able to make that look even remotely convincing, and it would mean I wouldn't be able to put the word resin in the video title. So I have another, more dubious idea. My plan to mimic the movie shot exactly is quickly thwarted by my inability to tell left from right. I'm using the framing of the camera to mark out how big my base needs to be, then realizing that that would take way too much epoxy to fill, I made it slightly smaller. I can just put some flames behind it in the thumbnail, it's fine. Remember this guy? Of course you don't, no one watched that video. I'm sorry, No Face, but you should have performed better. After a quick ghost autopsy, I can harvest the juicy spirit meat and quickly flatten it with a classic Scottish-Canadian power slap. Guess I'll just have to do it the old-fashioned way and throw it into the oven until it's soft and incredibly uncomfortably warm to touch. As soon as it's smooshed into, I can cut out its main silhouette before carving around the outside edge until it has a good jagged rock shape, which I guess makes little sense seeing as this is liquid lava, magma, whichever this one is, but at least it looks somewhat interesting. Of course, now it's way too small and there's barely enough room for the head and arm to fit, so I'll have to add on some more clay and give that the same treatment. As soon as the new clay is as cold and hard as the helmet Viggo broke his toe kicking, I'll start building the mold. The baseboard is just a cut-off piece of a cardboard box, and for the mold walls this time I'll try to just build something out of more clay. After a good night's rest, our lava container is fully cured. As soon as the walls are down and the mold removed, the wall clay goes into a plastic bag for safekeeping for whatever ill-considered casting idea I get to next. Now, all I have to do is a bit of plastic hybrid surgery, and the clay sculpt basically pops right out of the mold. Since I don't think our stove gets hot enough to make lava, it's once again time to pray at the altar of epoxy. This stuff also makes sad times for your lungs, so make sure to wear a mask at all times. I'll start by measuring out part A, which I then add a few drops of yellow pigment to and set aside to air out. I'll then measure out the hardener, add our yellow soup to that, and stir until it's thoroughly mixed. The mold goes into a plastic container, not only in case of a mess, but also so that I can close the lid on it while it's curing. To have the arm embedded properly into the lava, I need to add it to the mix already at the first layer. To assist me in defying gravity, I've enlisted my trusty helping hand again, which sadly is sans their very adorable face today, but with hands still at optimal helpingness level. Now, I wasn't able to make a grip directly onto the arm itself, but I cut off a bit of a leather strap that I can use as a handle. After adjusting the placement to the best of my ability, I'll vacate the room and let the resin cure until tomorrow. It's been 24 hours and the first resin layer is done curing. To make sure layer 2 has something to grab onto, I first have to give the surface a quick rub with sandpaper. This is the layer we need to attach the head to. However, I didn't really take into account what angle it would point when laid flat, so to make it look somewhat into the camera, I need to add a little clay riser to the back of Gollum's noggin. I can then glue the whole thing to our half-full glass of lava and start pouring the second and final layer of resin, pop some bubbles and pop the whole thing back into the box overnight.
24 hours later.
The final layer of Gollum's suspect bathwater is now fully cured and ready. Only obstacle is that it is too slippery for paint to stick to, but nothing a little high-grit sandpaper won't fix. As I don't really know what I'm doing here, and if it's even going to work, I'm building up the color layers super slowly, so slow you can barely tell with the light turned on, using sponges and frayed end brushes, starting with a reddish orange all the way up to an almost black dark brown. It's called Lord of the Rings and not Lord of the No Rings in it, so I guess we should probably make one of those. My first attempt was cutting out and baking a few of these clay cylinders, then scalpeling and sanding that into what I figured was a decent ring shape. I used a drill bit to hand drill the whole part of the ring, but a quick trip in the time machine to before we painted the arm shows that not only is it shaped like the world's thickest Fruit Loop, but the diameter was also too small. The diameter of this sculpting tool, however, looks just right, so I rolled out some clay at appropriate ring thickness, wrapped it around the tool and threw the whole thing into the oven. I baked one in Cosclay because it's flexible, one in Sculpey for hardness, and another one in the same Sculpey for when I inevitably break the first one. I'm using a piece of coarser sandpaper to even out and make the ring the right height, then a higher grit one to smooth out the sharp edges for that round ring shape. For the inside of the ring, I wrapped some sandpaper around a wooden skewer and slid the ring on there for a fully normal and totally monetizable shot. I base coated the ring with my favorite black lacquer spray for its smoothness and because black makes gold look more gold-like because of science. To get the right gold hue, I mixed some of this slightly too green gold paint with a bit of copper and some gold pigment. My genius idea of gluing the ring to the top of a skewer and just stir it around in the shiny soup went taters up when the ring snapped off and had to be fished back out. But after an hour of drying and a second fix-up coat, it ended up looking pretty okay. So when I did my first rings video, the comment section was filled to the brim with ring scientists helpfully pointing out that having the text on the ring light up when the ring wasn't actually being subjected to heat was blasphemy. Now I was pretty tempted to not have glowing letters now that the ring is in lava, but then I remembered the fluo paint that I used for the headlight in my Mario Kart video, the one that lights up like a $10 a night motel room under UV light, and I just couldn't resist. So I bought this. Now, my sausage fingers and general lack of body control means I won't be able to fit all the letters on there, very few actually, so let me know in the comments what offensive anti-Star Wars propaganda I created this time.
How dare you call me that?
Now all that is left is to reunite our sous vide friend with his rightful property, try to remember where I put that LED light, and we are done. Thank you so much for coming along on yet another one of these projects. I hope you enjoyed the video, or if at nothing else, at least chuckle at some memes along the way. Now, if you skipped straight here and missed our little chat earlier, the TLDR is that I'm considering finding a better name for the channel than my own dumb name. So if you suddenly have a video from Messy Times with Mr. Beard in your feed, that might be me. I'm also strongly considering setting up a Patreon as a way for people to support the channel and for me to connect more directly with you guys and give you more fun stuff. So keep an eye out for that. Now, I feel like I say this every time, but I'm actually trying to make these come out at a steadier clip. So if I succeed at that, I'll see you again sooner rather than later for the next video. Oh, I guess I'm still trying to make this slogan stuff be a thing, so until then, make a mess
and build cool stuff.